الآن ننتقل إلى الجلسة المقبلة، وهي تحت عنوان تمكين إنشاء الروابط بين المستثمرين وقطاع الأعمال. فأرجو من السادة المشاركين في هذه الجلسة التوجه إلى المسرح. السيد عمر أحمد باحليوة، وكما هو موجود في الجدول أيضا معالي الدكتور توفيق بن فوزان الربيعة، السيد مارك أوتي، والدكتور سعيد بن عبد الله الشيخ، والدكتور بطرس كلينك، والسيد كلود سمادجا، والسيدة جوانا ريس، والسيد إدوارد بيرتون.
Please allow me now to present Ahmed Bahlaiwa, who is the moderator of this session, and he will introduce the panel. Engineer Omar Bahlaiwa is the director or the Secretary General of the International Trade Commission in Saudi Arabia. He is one of the international figures. He also assumes the post of the Secretary General of the International Trade Committee in Saudi Arabia. He has wide experience and a large net of links at the international level and the local level. He can thus play a role in promoting relations among institutions. His role now is summarized in promoting and supporting the image of Saudi Arabia through chairing different missions to Europe and North America and other places, including member states of the OECD. Also, he works closely with the aim of promoting exports and attracting foreign imports and investments to Saudi Arabia. He was chosen as one of the leading figures in Saudi Arabia. He assumed different administrative posts, including senior financial analyst in the Saudi Development Fund, also director of major factories, and vice chairman of sales in the Saudi company for marketing industries, and director General of Match Company and Assistant Director of Assistant Secretary General for Foreign Affairs at the Council of the Saudi Chambers of Commerce. He is now Secretary General of the Saudi Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Secretary General of the International Trade Committee. Please welcome with me Engineer Omar and the participants in this session. Thank you, Brother Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Peace and praise be upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'd like to welcome you to this session, and I'd like to apologize on behalf of His Excellency, the Minister of Commerce and Industry, because he had to travel to South Africa as he has to participate in the Saudi-South African Committee. So on behalf of our brothers in the Jeddah Chamber of Commerce, we'd like to apologize for the absence of His Excellency the Minister. However, we have a constellation of economic experts and analysts in this session. I hope that we all will enjoy by listening and benefiting from their local and international experience. On my right hand, His Excellency Dr. Saeed Abdullah Sheikh, who is a member of the Shura Council and senior economist at the National Bank, NCB, in addition to other wide experiences in Saudi Arabia. Then Claude Smadja, the founder and chairman of Smadja for strategic consultancies. He was also the former chairman of president of the World Economic Forum, which is the most famous conference institutions at the level of the globe. Then we have Boutros Klink, which is who is the executive president of Standard Chartered Bank in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Then we have Joanna Rees, member of the board of directors of Joanna, of Endeavor International company from San Francisco. Then we have Edward Burton, the executive president of the Saudi American Business Council in Washington, followed by John Hope O'Brien, who is the founder and the chairman of the board of directors and the executive chairman of Operation Hope Group in the United States of America. We will start today by presentations from the participants, and we will receive your questions and queries. Thereafter, there will be 5 questions on which there will be voting, and we hope to have your interaction. So we'll give Dr. Saeed the floor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to be here speaking to such distinguished audience. And before I start, I'd like to extend my appreciation to Jeddah Chambers of Commerce, Jeddah Economic Forum, for inviting me to be speaking to you this afternoon. Also, I want to extend my appreciation to the chairman of this session, my dear friend, Omar Bahlaiwa. What I have for you today is something that I would share with you regarding the developments in Saudi economy. I would touch briefly on the global economy just to set the context as I move and talk about the Saudi economy. So the outlook, the outline for my presentation, brief on the global economy, oil and budgetary developments, economic growth forecasts, monetary developments, and financial markets. On the global economy scene, we see the world economy to be improving as we move in 2014. IMF projection for 2014 at 3.7% compared to 3% of last year, 2013. The world is moving at multi-stage growth. Advancing economies are recovering. Emerging economies are moderating. Europe is improving, is coming from a recession to a slow recovery. One thing important that happened over mid-year last year with the announcement of the US Federal Reserve to start tapering or scaling down the stimulus packages, and we see a divergence in the interest rate between emerging economies and developed economies. Those emerging economies at the top, as we see the interest rates to be rising, while remains to be accommodative for advanced economies, whether that is ECB or Federal Reserve or Bank of England. Yield has changed, so the yield has been shifting upward. Gold last year was a safe haven, not anymore. Depressed or fell by 28%, recovered over the last month or so. On your right-hand side, the chart for gold. Inflation has dropped last year, but started to rise since late of last year until now. The implication on currencies had been tremendous with the tapering. We see currencies such as Brazilian real losing 15% since January 2013 up till now. Also, lira has lost, Turkish lira lost 20%. Commodities edged downward last year as the dollar was strengthening following the announcement of tapering. Petroleum remained stable, and the economy, the stock markets of the world, if we look to emerging markets, they contracted by nearly 9% since January 2013, while the MSCI for the world gained nearly 20%. Now I move to Saudi economy. I would start with the oil, and at the background of this slide, the gray, you see the level of production in Saudi Arabia for last year was averaging 9.6 million barrels a day. We're expecting production to be in the range of 9.4 million barrels a day. Also, we're expecting prices to edge downward from an average of $106 a barrel as of last year to $100 a barrel this year. More likely, the tension, especially as it relates to Iran and Libya, will ease in the second half, and that's why we're expecting, production by Saudi Arabia to sort of coming down, as more production will be coming from Libya as well as from Iran. So this is the oil scenario. Now, this has important implications on the fiscal accounts of Saudi Arabia and the current account. As of last year, 2013, the current account balance was nearly 23% to GDP, and fiscal account balance at 14% or at 7.4, I'm sorry, of GDP last year, 2013, and 17.4% for the current account. We're expecting that to be coming down in 2014 at 13.9 for the current account, the surpluses, the balance of payment, and also for the fiscal account to be at 0.7% to GDP due to lower prices and lower production. Now, what you have in this table is the announced budget for 2014, projecting a balanced budget, 855 billion for expenditure, as well as 855 for revenues. However, we're projecting revenues to rise to 973 billion Saudi riyals, and at the same time, we're projecting expenditure to be at 953 with a surplus of 20 billion Saudi riyals, certainly much lower than the surplus of last year at 206 billion Saudi riyals, largely attributed to the lower level of production as well as lower prices and at the same time rising expenditure by government. The government over the last few years followed a policy, a fiscal policy that focused on three aspects: accelerating expenditures with the emphasis on capital expenditure. And what you see in this slide, the upper component is the capital expenditure. The orange is showing the current expenditure. So the level of expenditure, total expenditure last year, the actual expenditure amounted to 925 billion Saudi riyals, 278 billion Saudi riyals spent on infrastructure, whether social infrastructure or physical infrastructure. We're expecting, as of this year, the level of capital expenditure to amount to 238 billion Saudi riyals. So that's the first policy development or fiscal policy aspect. With the announced budget, 5 major sectors receive nearly 53% of the overall budget. Education was on top at 206 billion Saudi riyals. Health and social affairs, 106 billion Saudi riyals. Municipality, and then transportation and infrastructure, and water and agriculture and manufacturing. And these are shown in the chart, accounting for 53% of the overall 855. So there has been an emphasis, of course, on education, manpower, on health, as you see in this chart for the sectoral distribution of the Saudi budget. A second important fiscal policy was to retire the public debt over the last few years. Public debt dropped from nearly 100% in 2002 to 2.7% of GDP in 2013. In terms of value, it is amounting for 75 billion Saudi riyals. However, this sort of helped the kingdom to gain an upgrading recently by Fitch, which put a sovereign rating for the kingdom at AA with a stable outlook. The third aspect of the fiscal policy is to build reserves. And what you see in this chart is the growth of the net foreign assets of the kingdom, amounted to $757 billion by the end of last year. nearly 2.7 trillion Saudi riyals. 1.7 trillion is the government reserves. The remaining 1 trillion is the amount held by SAMA as a cover for Saudi riyals. With the presence of such sizable reserves, the government will be able to manage any adverse developments in oil and to carry through with its expenditure program at least for 2 or 3 years, if there is any adverse developments or negative developments in the oil market. But one had also to pay attention to the fiscal policy. As we have seen in the last few years, fiscal policy has been expansionary, but at the same time, we see an overrun in the budget. The gray component is showing the additional expenditure year after year until we reach the 925 billion Saudi riyals as of last year. One thing that we had to be watchful as we move forward and careful about it, because it is going to be difficult if oil prices were to assume negative direction, and whether the government will be able to carry on with this level of spending with lower oil prices and lower oil production, if production to be rising from neighboring countries in the region, Iraq, Iran, Libya, and also with the fast development of shale oil in the US and also other parts of the world. In this chart, what I'm trying to show is a contrast between the implicit price and the Saudi budget in the period 2007 all the way to 2009, when the implicit price for the budget was nearly $45 a barrel. That has changed to nearly $82 a barrel, which is the price they assume in the budget, basically when putting the preliminary budget. The break-even that is expected for this year, 2014, would reach $87 a barrel, which would mean if oil prices fall below $87 a barrel, then we'll be running into deficit. More likely, we'll be maintaining the $100 a barrel, so we're still in surplus, but one had to be careful as we're seeing this direction to be rising from the $40 to $87 a barrel. Now, as far as growth, we've seen the overall GDP growth moderating in 2013 to 3.8% from previous year of nearly 4.2 or 4.3%, and of course much lower than 8% of 2011. This is in real terms. However, this contraction or this deceleration in growth was attributed to the small contraction in the oil sector at 0.6%. Much of the growth was coming from the non-oil private and non-oil public. If we look to the non-oil sector growth was reasonable or good at 5.5% in 2013, expected to be at the same level in 2014. The drivers for that growth was coming from construction, private services, and manufacturing. These are the three sectors that are driving economic growth so far, and in the past few years, and more likely in the coming years as well. An important development also would relate to the level of spending on infrastructure and also on productive assets. Total contracts awarded in 2013 amounted to 294 billion Saudi riyal, the largest in the history of the kingdom to have that amount of contracts awarded in a single year. And if we look for the level of contracts awarded over the last about 4 or 5 years, we're talking about nearly 1.2 trillion Saudi riyals worth of contracts awarded. Obviously, this is already generating or helping in generating economic growth by creating demand and goods and services, and at the same time will increase the capacity of the Saudi economy, especially as it relates to infrastructure or productive sectors such as petrochemicals, steel, aluminums, and others. Now, let me talk about the monetary developments. Of course, with Saudi riyal being sort of linked to the dollar, monetary policy more or less is following the US Federal Reserve policy, and we see the SAIBOR rate to be at around 1% over the last few years, and at least since 2011 onward is around the 1%. SAMA has issued the treasury notes to absorb some of the liquidity or excess liquidity in the market, but we have seen lending to be rising by 12%. Level of inflation moderated recently at 3%. It remains to be supported by, especially at the beginning of the year, by imported inflation with the reversal in the global inflation index, and at the same time with the rental cost, which is local, that is continuing to rise at 3.5% year on year. Lending, an important development, of course, and contributing to the growth of the private sector. The incremental lending as of 2013 amounted to nearly 116 billion Saudi riyals at around 12%. And if we look to lending by economic activities, we find manufacturing, commerce, and consumers, these that are exceeding the remaining, are accounting for the largest shares of the total lending. Total lending amounted to 1.1 trillion Saudi riyals. Consumer lending amounted to 340 billion Saudi riyals. Manufacturing, 139, and commerce around 220 billion. Building and constructions at around 80 billion Saudi riyals. All of them show the growth from previous year. So 2013 were in higher level than 2012. Now let me talk briefly about the Saudi stock market. We've seen the index to be gaining 25% last year, very much influenced by what happened at the global level when we have seen the Dow to be rising by 29%, even though the level of the volume of trading remained stable last year at around 5 billion Saudi riyal. Since the beginning of the year, the index has moved by nearly 10% or 9%. And we're seeing this increase to be fast. Hopefully that we'll see some correction and not continuing at the same trend. So that should not be leading to a serious or a sharp correction. The PE ratios are exceeding the level of 16 multiples at this time. And if this were to continue, if this trend were to continue throughout the year, then obviously we'll be running through major corrections. But hopefully that we'll see some corrections moving forward. Now, IPOs since 2008 has been stagnant. Very little activity in the IPO market, initial public offerings. As of last year, 2013, the amount raised was 1.9 billion Saudi riyals, 5 issuances. Certainly, that's not helping. Hopefully, there will be more IPOs coming in order to reduce the pressure that we have seen in the previous slide with the stock market. The bond market, or Sukuk issuances, had done very well. Saudi Arabia came second after Malaysia with $15 billion worth of issuances. GACA, 15 billion Saudi riyals, Sadara, 7.5 billion, and even SEC issued 3.75 billion Saudi riyals, a 30-year Sukuk. The one thing that is noticeable here is the size of the global market, which is $74 billion, and Saudi Arabia came second after Malaysia. With that, I conclude my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saeed. A powerful economic, powerful economy, largest in the Middle East. What we need is to maximize the benefits from the outcome of this economy and making use of international experts. We have a constellation of international experts. So with your permission, we can give the chance to Claude Smadja to give us an idea in this regard.
I would like, first of all, to thank the Jeddah Economic Forum for giving me the honor to speak in front of you today and for their invitation. I would like also to congratulate the Jeddah Economic Forum because I think the theme of this forum, growth through use, is absolutely essential. It is spot on, and it is a priority not only for a country like Saudi Arabia, but for many, many countries around the world. Now, let me start with three basic realities. Number one reality, real growth and real jobs creation comes through entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are the only people, the only category which creates growth, which creates jobs. Number two basic reality, in every country in the world, finance is the most important, the most difficult challenge that entrepreneurs have to overcome to transform an idea or a project into a business reality. Basic reality number three, finance is a problem, but on many occasions, the finance exists. The potential financing exists. The challenge is to connect finance with entrepreneurs. And I would like to quote the former chairman of the NASDAQ, David Welt, when he said, if we cannot put the money into the hands of the people who create jobs, then we will not have a very bright future. So this is very crucial. Now that I have set the stage, let me tell you about the three key aspects in linking investors, linking finance to entrepreneurs. The number one key component is, of course, as we are speaking about finance, to have deep enough and diversified enough financial markets. We know today, from the last 50 years of experience, that to have the process of creative destructions that create growth, meaning by that new companies, new technologies coming up and displacing old technologies, old companies, to have this process to work, you need to have a good financial system. You need to have deep financial markets. Of course, banks can provide money to entrepreneurs, but we know that banks in that respect play a kind of limited role. What you need to create, what you need to find are structures, for instance, of venture capital. We know that what has made the success of the US economy of Silicon Valley has been a very strong, very wide basis structure of venture capital. Europe has been creating this basis of venture capital. Latin America has, in the last few years, developed that structure. We know that the MENA region is lagging behind. Of course, it is now starting to catch up, but this structure of venture capital is absolutely a key element to develop in the coming years. But beyond that, what we see today, which is very important, are new modes of financing for entrepreneurs and startups. You have now a development of a trend of peer-to-peer financing, individual connecting with entrepreneurs and financing their project. And the latest innovation is what is called crowdfunding. It is a system through which, through websites, entrepreneurs are communicating their projects, and you have hundreds or even thousands of very small investors in a way, being convinced that this is a good project, and the amount of money that can be accumulated is then enough to transform a project into a commercial reality. Just to give you an idea, it is estimated that in 2013, there were $5 billion of transaction through this new system of crowdfunding. Of course, it requires technology, it requires social framework, it requires regulatory framework, but this is something that in this part of the world, for instance, could provide a very good way of leapfrogging to provide financing to entrepreneurs. But, of course, you have the websites, you have the digital, but what is essential is to create the platforms where would-be investors and would-be entrepreneurs can come together face to face. This is why an initiative like the Jeddah Economic Forum is so important, and I think there should be much more Jeddah Economic Forum, not only in Jeddah, but in the country and throughout the region. In fact, these platforms are essential. Just to give you an example, I had been invited twice to speak in Barcelona to an annual event which is designed to bring together face-to-face, sitting across the table, would-be entrepreneurs and would-be investors. This is what some activities of the World Economic Forum are trying to do. This is, for instance, what we do with the Mexico Business Summit in Mexico, where we bring every year 80 entrepreneurs to meet with investors and to also communicate and learn from global business leaders. Last but not least, in this network that you need to create is the importance of clusters. If I take one example in Saudi Arabia, we have the King Abdulaziz Knowledge and Technology City, which will become the host for the global center for business activities, for new business activities. This is the kind of clusters that are very important. If you look at Switzerland, for instance, the École Polytechnique Fédérale has created a cluster to bring young entrepreneurs, and it is providing a tremendous support. And we have seen today in my country a number of new businesses created on the basis of technology, and they are beginning to flourish very much. So this notion of linking technology center and business incubators is very important. Now let me go to the third component, which is the role of government. Government has to provide support, and it is not only financial support. It is support in terms of helping strategies, helping to orient entrepreneurs, helping them to transform a project into a commercial reality. Look at the role that the Small Business Administration is playing in the US for small and medium-sized companies. Look at the role that the administration for SMEs is playing in the UK. Look at the new innovative structure that Singapore has created to promote and to help and support new entrepreneurs. Look also closer to Saudi Arabia, to the Tukur structure which has been created in nearby Kuwait. So this role of the state is very important because, as I said, it is finance, it is support, but it is legitimization of a project of the entrepreneurs. So you need to have these three components to come together: financial markets, networking, platforms for networks, and the role of the government. And I will stop here, Omar, because we will get back to some point in the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claude. Thank you very much. Please give us an applaud.
Very important points we take from Claude, but we'll come back to them in Q&A. Importance is there are important points, especially the point relating to the venture capital, which we need to develop as a thinking or an idea in Saudi Arabia. Now we give the floor to Boutros Klink.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Gentlemen, ladies, Your Excellencies, it's a privilege and an honor to be here to speak at this forum on such an important topic. What I would like to do in the next few minutes is really provide you with a banker's perspective on the development of the SME sector. My bank is focused on emerging markets, and we have enormous expertise, in developing this space. It is a big focus for us. The SME sector is the backbone of economic development for both developed and developing countries. Entrepreneurship, as my colleague Claude just mentioned, is essential. It improves competitiveness. It improves trade. It creates employment. Also, small organizations play such an important role in basically, providing innovation. They are free. They can come up with great ideas. They play a significant role in reduction of poverty and social integration. Now, when I look at the SME sector, it is 95% of the enterprises globally. It is around 2/3 of the labor market. It grows around twice the growth rate of GDPs of countries. And it constitutes between 30 and 60% of GDPs in general, and it goes beyond that in certain cases. Now, when it comes to the Middle East, there are always some distinction between oil-producing countries and non-oil-producing countries. The impact of SMEs is definitely larger in non-oil-producing countries because it is more important to the improvement of living conditions of people. In oil-producing countries, and Saudi especially, one thing to look at is like the percentage of loans to SMEs by the financial institutions relative to the total amount of loans. And basically, it hardly reaches 5%. If we're looking at diversifying the economy, if we are looking at welcoming a huge set of young population into the labor market, the SME sector is of tremendous importance. Now, one thing to do is look at other countries and what they have done, and I would like to mention two countries that have, that I single out because one, the SME sector has played such an important role in them becoming a developed economy. Also, the government has played a very important role in supporting the SME sector, and they have looked at it holistically. And the example that comes to mind first is really the example of South Korea, where employment in the SME sector is around 95%. Now, one thing to note is it didn't happen overnight. It was an entire, over a period of around 50 years, where it started in the 60s with some basic laws and regulations, to the second phase during the 70s and 80s, the growth phase, where it was more about localization, reduction in imports, focus on exports, focus on incorporating technology, machinery. Then, during the Asian crisis, they hit some tough times, and the sector really, got hurt quite significantly. But they looked at it as a way to restructure innovate. And then finally, we will talk a little bit more on the type of funds that were developed to provide a more stable capital. Another country that I'd like to mention due to the SME clusters that my colleague just mentioned, and it's Italy. And what they have found is by grouping small companies within a small zone enables tremendous improvements in efficiency, coordination, cooperation, specialization, yes, competition, yes. But at the end of the day, it's a much better product that is developed and it's more sustainable. Now let me get to the financing part, which is what we look at. When we talk to our clients from the SME space, what are they looking for? First thing, they want access to financing. And that is, as was mentioned superbly, enormously important. Now, when we look at those companies, one, they do not have collateral. They do not have sufficient capital. A lot of the applications that get presented to the banks generally get turned down. And there are certain reasons behind it. One of those reasons is, they do not have organized financial statements. The second thing is there is a lack of transparency. They don't have the financial sophistication. Also, in general, as we look at different countries and different countries have, things change among the different countries, we look at the regulatory framework. We look at the transparency and access to information, both private and public, things like bureaus, credit bureaus. Also, another important thing is the registries and of the securities and the properties of those companies. The second point that they look for is a business environment that is conducive to promote these great ideas. First thing is, property rights, contract enforcement, tax rates. It's important. In areas where there is corruption, it impacts small companies enormously. Many of the guys at the helm of those companies, lack the management experience, lack the financial experience and training, lack the business experience and training. They want solutions that are simple. They want solutions that are convenient, solutions that are efficient. And let us not forget that they are going through an evolutionary phase. So they start off small, and then they move to a growth phase, and then they even become more complex, and their needs change along the way. So what, as financial institutions, do we need to do? One is to come up with creative solutions for underwriting credit standards for SMEs. I mean, this is very, very important, because if we apply the rules and the methods and policies that we have in place to small organizations, generally we will not be very successful. So a lot of work goes in this area to ensure that we are approaching the SME space in the right way, giving them the right level of focus.
But
not
you have 1 minute, please.
Okay. Another thing is the underwriting of the risk. How do we diversify the credit risk of SMEs? Another thing is we try to partner up with other organizations that provide some form of training to the small entrepreneurs. Another point that we look at is, we look at the SME sector, as one sector. It is more complex than the retail. It is less complex than the corporate space. And finally, we also look at trying to provide solutions that go from the micro companies, if you will, to the growth phases, to the points where companies become a bit larger to expand overseas where they really need seamless banking throughout the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Boutros. Thank you very much. Now, Rees.
And you need the...
Yeah, we're...
Well...
Oh, he left it up there?
I'll do the honor. I'll get you the... Too late.
Thank you.
You have 9 minutes. You lost 1 minute.
There we go. Oops, gone too far. Hi, first of all, it's an honor to be here. I have been a venture capitalist for the last 15 years. I also served on the board of the National Venture Capital Association in the United States. So I spent a lot of time working with government and trying to bridge the gap between government and entrepreneurial development and job creation. But I'm here today representing Endeavor, a global organization that supports high-impact entrepreneurs in emerging markets. And there was a lot of talk earlier today about bureaucracy and red tape and entrepreneurial development. And even if you get all of that right, entrepreneurs still face some incredible challenges and barriers to success. Many of them are listed here on the slide: the cost of failure, the access to capital we've talked about, the lack of trust, the lack of professional development. And one thing that we know very specifically with Endeavor is the lack of role models. When you have, when entrepreneurs can see great role models, it really inspires them to step up and try something big. I know tomorrow you have Chris Hughes from Facebook, one of the co-founders. He's a great role model in Silicon Valley, as is Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, who have really inspired the next generation of entrepreneurs. At Endeavor, we have screened 35,000 entrepreneurs over the last 17 years and selected just 880. And we recently launched in Saudi Arabia, and the bar is actually high, but we've selected already 8 entrepreneurs from Saudi Arabia, so we have a great start here. Those entrepreneurs in Saudi Arabia now have access to more than 3,000 mentors globally from around the world who have very defined support relationships with the entrepreneurs, so it's not just within their country. We have partnerships with Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, and MIT, where we bring MBAs into the companies, as we will be doing in Saudi Arabia. We have partnerships with Bain, who's provided $25 million worth of strategic consulting pro bono to Endeavor companies, as well as Ernst & Young, who's put more than 80 fellows into our companies to help support them. We also host many gatherings and support functions for our entrepreneurs. And lastly, we have more than 50 venture capital funds that mentor the entrepreneurs in the process of fundraising, and then also many of them end up supporting those entrepreneurs with funds. And what we've learned is the impact can be significant. When people talk about SME or SME businesses, they maybe hire 2 or 3 people. The average Endeavor entrepreneur hires more than 200. I like to give the example of an entrepreneur in Brazil who was creating wind blades for wind technology. When we started with him, he was a very small business. Now he's the 2nd largest producer of wind blades in the world, doing over $800 million in revenue. The other key point is the average Endeavor company employee makes 7 times the average wage of their competitor. So it's not only significant jobs at scale, but it's jobs that pay better than jobs in their field. We are in 19 countries and 43 cities around the world, and you can see that we now have really started to penetrate this region, having launched in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan, Lebanon, and Egypt. And we're quite excited about this growth. So one of the things that we challenged ourselves with, we said, we're providing all of this great mentorship and support, but could we come up with an investment vehicle that would fill in the last piece, which is, as other panelists have talked about, the lack of funding? And we did a historical look. We said, had we had a structured fund in place over the last 10 years, based on the actual fundraising and exits of Endeavor entrepreneurs, what would the returns have been? Bain actually did this study for us, and it would have returned about 3 times on invested capital, which would put us in top decile of growth equity funds performance, which really doesn't surprise me because we have more than 350 people around the world supporting these entrepreneurs to help them grow into, successful, high-impact businesses. So we came up with a structure of a fund we call Endeavor Catalyst. One of the unique aspects of it is that the profits from the fund, unlike a traditional venture capital or private equity fund, do not profit individuals. They're profits that fund the growth of the organization. So if you look at the contrast between the two, all of the profits that come to Endeavor are getting recycled back into the markets in which those entrepreneurs exist. We also set up a really unique structure with the fund. We, as an entrepreneurial organization, we said it's important to keep reinventing. And unlike a traditional venture capital or private equity fund, the money, we have 2 pieces of money that get invested in the entrepreneurs. We have a traditional limited partnership that exists in many places. It's a Delaware limited partnership. But we also have a philanthropic entity. This is where people have given money as pure philanthropy, and we invest side by side. We put a tiny bit of money in from the philanthropy when we invest in the entrepreneur. Then what happens when the company has a liquidity event, either the company gets sold or has an IPO, the investor gets their pro rata share of the investment back, plus a competitive return. And then we're able to allocate profits within the investment to the philanthropy, so the rest of the money comes to Endeavor tax-free. This has not existed in this structure before. It passed the US government IRS standards, even though it's a tax-free entity, and it's providing investment capital for Endeavor entrepreneurs all over the world. The last piece of it is, first I should mention there's no management fees on the fund because we're really trying to align our interests with that of the investor and making sure we both share in profits at the same time. But we've enabled the fund if an investor comes from a specific Endeavor country. So I'll use the example of Saudi Arabia. If an investor invested in the fund from Saudi Arabia, when the returns are achieved, the investor gets their profits. But then the money that comes to Endeavor, half of it gets recycled and brought back into Saudi Arabia to continue to regenerate new business creation and support the funding of those businesses. All yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you very much. That's very informative.
Now, Ed Burton. Executive Chairman of the Saudi American Business Council at the American side in Washington.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me add my words of gratitude to the Jeddah Economic Forum and the Jeddah Chamber of Commerce for consistently organizing and executing on very good events that not only portray the commercial and economic might of the kingdom, but also its commitment to small, medium-sized entrepreneurs in the kingdom. I had the privilege and honor of living and working in the kingdom for 3 years, and during that time, I had the opportunity to get to know the business communities across the kingdom fairly well. And a lot is said of Silicon Valley in the United States, and a lot is said of the ecosystems that exist for small business in the United States. But I can tell you that I have viewed the same kind of creativity, innovation, and passion for business within small businesses in Saudi Arabia that I have seen in other parts of the world, including the United States. So I think when you look at institutions like Endeavor, and you look at other institutions that have been operating in the kingdom that support small businesses, such as the Centennial Fund, even the chambers of commerce within the kingdom, and the programs that they have for young Saudi entrepreneurs, men and women, I think Saudi should be very proud of what exists in terms of the infrastructure to support small and medium-sized businesses in the kingdom. Speaking from the perspective, of course, of the U.S.-Saudi business relationship, of which I'm most familiar with, I can tell you that after 20 years of existence, the U.S.-Saudi Arabian Business Council is not only committed to the majority of companies you see on its roster, which are the biggest and the best of Saudi Arabia and Fortune 500 companies in the kingdom, but we're also committed to helping small and medium-sized businesses make the linkage across the Atlantic between U.S. and Saudi companies. And there is a lot to offer on both sides. Just within the few minutes that I have, I'll mention some examples of what the United States is doing. Not that Saudi Arabia has to emulate the United States, but I think that we can learn from each other, and certainly when it comes to small and medium-sized businesses, there are institutions and programs in place in the United States that Saudi Arabia, I think, should at least look at because they assist with the building blocks of successful entrepreneurs. But very briefly, in terms of what's available in the United States, most of the world, of course, is coming out of recession, global economic downturn over the last 8 years. The United States, of course, is leading the pack in coming out of that. At the end of last year, it was recorded that American companies banked an additional $130 billion in cash added to what they already had. So at the end of last year, you had cash holdings of American companies of $1.4 trillion. Now, 58% of that, about $840 billion, has been held overseas in overseas cash accounts. So American companies are flush with cash. They're in a position now, and you can see some of the M&A activity happening. They are looking at opportunities overseas. One of the biggest vehicles, of course, is private equity. But even if you look at private equity within the kingdom, and you have some big names here, JP Morgan, KKR, even their smallest fund, $500 million, it does not, I think, address some of the financial needs of small and medium-sized companies, because most of those firms don't look at anything over $100 million. So when we look at this cash and we look at this, unfortunately, the disincentives that you find in the United States, the marginal effective tax rate in the United States is 35.3%. It's the highest in the developed world. You have an incentive for companies to look at investment vehicles here and elsewhere in the world. So what we have is a phenomenon happening in the United States where private equity now is bypassing very large deals and looking at small and medium-sized companies which are actually outperforming large investments and actually outperforming the S&P 500. So the preferred vehicle now for private equity in the United States to invest in small and medium-sized businesses are what's called business development companies. Now, these are publicly traded entities in the United States, and since 2010, 21 of these entities have been created and have been raising funds totaling $2.16 billion.
1 minute.
The SBA has also gotten in partnership with private equity and has actually spent and invested close to $20 billion on an annual basis in partnership with private equity for what they call the Small Business Investment Company. And they are committing another $2 to $3 billion every year to this. This is something in terms of financing of small and medium-sized companies, as well as what was mentioned earlier, the assistance in getting companies in proximity to foreign investors, something that we have done on an annual basis. This kind of assistance, including perhaps the subsidization of costs for companies to attend trade events overseas, is something that the kingdom should look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Now, finally, أخيرا سيد John Hop, Brian.
Finally, John Hop, Ryan.
Minutes, John.
Men's gentlemen's
My
section.
goal is for you not to have to tell me that I've got a minute left. So I don't normally use remarks, but I've got some notes to keep this crisp. First of all, thank you, Moderator, and the Jeddah Forum and the Chamber, and my friends at Setco Holdings, which is my lead partner here in Saudi, for your support here today. Let me start by saying that I grew up in a poor neighborhood. I was homeless for 6 months of my life when I was 18 years old. Today, I lead an organization, Operation Hope, that's invested through our partners, $2 billion US. All of that invested profitably in so-called poor and underserved neighborhoods, all of it. We raised credit scores 120 points in America over 18 months, which is transformational for somebody's life. Now, my point there is rainbows only follow storms. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. So let's deal straight with the challenges in front of us and see them through the lens of opportunity. Gallup says that by the year 2045, global GDP will be $200 trillion. Global GDP right now is about 62 trillion, give or take. America has a quarter of that. The only question is who gets $140 trillion? That's the long goal, because you cannot be a world leader or any other kind of leader unless you're an economic leader. You're almost at 1 trillion here in Saudi Arabia. How do we double that? I have 5 very crisp, what I call big bangs for Saudi and MENA region growth. Here they are. Number 1, demographics are destiny. It's like your personal GPS system. 60% of the population of Saudi Arabia right now is under the age of 25. Right now. 60% of the regions, the MENA region's population by 2020 will be under the age of 25. Number 2, by the way, most people see this as a problem. I see it as an opportunity. Number 2, jobs in the MENA region. Every respectable report you read articulates a need for 100 million jobs in the MENA region by 2020. Now, in 2004, that'd be alarming. In 2010, that'd be scary. By 2014, it should be downright frightening. It's 100 million jobs. Where are they going to come from? Because they're not going to come from government, and they're not going to come from big business. They're going to come from going small. Third point, this is very interesting. Jobs in America, the largest economy in the world. Now, here's what we tell our kids in America. We tell our kids to go to public school, K through 12, middle school, elementary school, middle school, and high school. Go to college, which they should, get a degree. And then we tell them to go work for a big business or government, neither of which are hiring. Here's where jobs come from. 8% of all jobs in America come from government. About inverse from this region, by the way. 92% come from the private sector. There was a time when we were just like you. In 1974, about 1974, 1980, 70% of all jobs in America came from big business, and 4% of all jobs came from one company, AT&T. Today, 70% of all jobs come from businesses with 500 employees or less. Half of all jobs in the largest economy in the world come from employers with 100 employees or less. Even more interesting, 7 billion people on the planet, give or take. 300 million people in America. 26, 27 million businesses in America. Of that, only 6 million of those businesses create 1 employee or more. Of those, 974 employ 10,000 people or more. You can count them. I mean, you can name them. Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, IBM, Google, Facebook. You can literally name them. Less than 1,000. And they aren't hiring, generally speaking. So where do these jobs come from? They come from startups, shoot-ups, small businesses, businesses you're funding, entrepreneurs. Here's another interesting number. We have about 18,000 businesses that employ between 1,000 and 18,000 people. So the majority, the vast majority of all GDP in America comes from small businesses with 500 employees or less, and 70% of our economy is driven by consumer spending. Now, here's the investment bet for Saudi Arabia in the MENA region. It's your people. It's not oil. It's your people. It'll be led by your youth. It'll be led by you going small. If somebody told me yesterday, if they went into a suit shop here, 10 rich people go into a suit shop, you buy 10 suits. But if you create a middle class and a working class, and 50 people go in, you buy 50 suits. You also have a small business that makes a suit, that sells a suit, and cleans the suit. By the way, the suit that I'm wearing today was created by an entrepreneur that I put in business. We raised his credit score 120 points. We gave him $35,000 as a loan. He's now doing $1 million in revenue and employing 6 people, paying his taxes, raising his children, and adding to the economy. This is the vision right here in your region, and I call it the investment plan for the future. I would do, if I were you, I would go into your public schools, and I'm wrapping up. I would open a Hope Business in a Box Academy in your public schools. I teach a kid a course in financial literacy, which is what we're doing with SETCO, with Reality. That's your new civil rights issue. If you don't understand the language of money, financial literacy, and you don't have a bank account, you'll never prosper. The next thing I do is give them a course in dignity, values, then a course in entrepreneurship. Then we have 25 businesses you can start for $500 or less. It's about a little under 2,000 real. Then we give them 2 minutes to pitch their business idea in front of a panel of judges. There's a timer. They pitch. Kids, the endorphins start firing in the right side of their heads. They're connecting education with aspiration. They're getting excited about their life. The most dangerous person is a person with no hope. Their hope is coming back. The judges pick one of the entrepreneurs or several. We fund the business. You then open a bank account to put the money in so they can't just go and run the money. Then you assign a business role model to them because life's all about role modeling. Why am I an entrepreneur? Because my father was. It's not role modeling. It's not magic, it's role modeling. The book, The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell, proved that at 5% role models, every community stabilizes. Not 80% role models, not 50% role models, not even 10. Just 5% will stabilize any community. So then we would have Gallup measure the back-end impact, and from there you'd create jobs. Silicon Valley was referenced earlier in the remarks. In 1830, the richest state in America was Mississippi, slave economy. Today, the poorest state in America is Mississippi. Silicon Valley saved America, which were all young people under the age of 45, creating the Facebooks, the Twitters, the YouTubes, and all the things that we take for granted today, and we're using all these devices created by young people who created $10 trillion in GDP out of an idea. The last thing I would recommend is in your bank branches, I'd put a hope inside, or something like it. We're like a private banker to the working man. And we basically put our hands around their challenges, create opportunities, raise up their credit scores, raise up their self-esteem, their financial IQ, and prepare them with confidence to go into the economy. There's nothing wrong with Saudi Arabia. There's nothing wrong with the MENA region, and there's nothing wrong with your kids. It's a crisis of virtues and values. And all you got to do is reimagine it.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. والله رفع معنوياتنا لأنه نحتاج الأمل ونحتاج الثقة وجون يمكن بالذات للشباب والشابات يعني نرجو أن يكون زي مشاعرهم تحمل نفس مشاعر سيد جون في عملية بناء المستقبل من لا شيء. فعندنا 6 دقائق للأسئلة والأجوبة. فحاعطي للقسم النساء
the back
سؤال
of the
وقسم
hall.
الرجال
We will
سؤال
come back to you. We have
وبعدين
still
حندخل
2 minutes
على
more. We will
الفوتينج.
combine two
فنبدأ
questions, then
بالليديز
we come to
فيرست.
the
إذا في
questions,
أسئلة
to
للقسم
the
النسائي
answers.
لو سمحتوا.
السلام عليكم. Thank you.
كويس ما في ولا سؤال من النساء. شكرا. اوكي في سيدة هناك. تفضلي تعرفي باسمك لو سمحتي ولا الجهة اللي أنت منها.
Thank you. My name بحكي بالعربي. شكرا. اسمي هالة وأنا من الأردن.
بالإنجليزي عشان يفهموا بس.
بالإنجليز. Thank you. My name is Hala. I'm from Jordan. I started my life working in the economic sector and moved to development. And now I work on women and youth empowerment. You mentioned something quite interesting at the end, and I having my question directed to all the panel, but especially our last speaker, about virtue, crisis of virtues and values. And I'd like to hear more about how do you see reintegrating the value of hard work, the value of equality, justice, and the issues that are really into our culture back for youth who, I fully agree with you, there's nothing wrong with our youth, it's us not giving them the right vehicles to bring the best in them. And in that case, I agree. So that's my questions. Thank you.
Shukran. John, I think that question is related to you. What would you ask her to do?
First of all, I admire her boldness in stating that. Let me say that America made this mistake. Most of these mistakes are made with good intentions. After the problems with slavery and other things, discrimination, we gave we were talking about this, we gave American blacks, as example, welfare. We put them to sleep. Good intentions. Put an entire generation to sleep because you can't give somebody hope. You can't give somebody self-esteem. You can't give somebody a work ethic. You got to instill that in them. And so I would say there's a difference between being broke and being poor. Being broke is economic, but being poor is a disabling frame of mind, a depressed condition of your spirit. You must vow never to be poor again. And I would suggest very respectfully that Saudi Arabia has done a beautiful thing in trying to make sure that people are okay, but they've done too much. You have not allowed your young people to suffer for the good, to struggle. If they want to go to school, here's some money. You want a loan, here's some money. You want to go shopping, here's some money. You don't want to work, here's some money. You're putting their values to sleep, and you've got to wake them up. There's nothing wrong with these kids. They are dying to live, to contribute, but they don't know how, and it's what you don't know that you don't know that's killing you. And so it's really just about going and embedding the core values back into society that they were born with in the first place. Essentially what I'm saying is your job is to reintroduce people to themselves. Reintroduce people back to their core nature, which is to work.
Okay, thank you. قسم الرجال في الأخير نعطي فرصة في الأخير الشباب. تفضل لهناك. ونرجع لك إن شاء الله. عندنا دقيقتين زيادة. حنجمع سؤالين بعدين نعطي الأجوبة للأخوان.
السلام عليكم. شكرا جزيلا. My name is Adnan Yusuf. I'm from Colleges of Excellence. Colleges of Excellence, very quick, it's a new project from the government which is uplifting the TVET education here in Saudi Arabia, technical vocational educational training. So I want to get some suggestions from you since we just started last year. How can we encourage our new students to be entrepreneur? So how is the ways? What should we do to encourage these students? We have now 7,000 students, and we have 10 colleges, and this year we're going to have another 27 new colleges, and we're going to bring it up to 150 by 2023. One part is actually to bring skilled Saudis to the market, plus we want to create the entrepreneurs. So what's your best suggestions for us to put it for our students?
Okay, shukran. تفضل أخ هنا وبعدين I think Joanna can answer it and Ed.
Yeah.
Please هنا وبعد.
Oh, one of the things that
we will collect more questions because we're short of time. Yeah. Can you make it quick, please, and pass it over to the person next to you? Please.
I'll make it quick, but with the respect of being attached to the community, I would address my issue to the bankers that we have here. Unfortunately, that's bankers all over the world. They're trying to do as much as they can to the communities, and they're trying to upscale to those juniors who would like to participate in the development in the countries. For instance, I'm a UN staff where I used to work in Nairobi, Kenya for 2 years. And I find out that Chartered Bank there, they are doing a hell of a good business to the community, to the smaller people who they would like to have their own help in their countries. I'm afraid that neither Charter or neither NCP or others who they are in the countries, they are not trying to support the cycle of how the new generation can be as a participant to assist at least the development of the country, and also to wave out the old mentalities and back up the compound of how they can upgrade our need for the future of this country. Thank you.
Shukran. Yeah, pass it over to the person next to you, please, immediately, then we'll have answers, and that's it. Can you make it quick, please?
Sure. Faisal Abbas from Arabian English. My question is for John, and I just want to follow up on the comment from the ladies section where she said the problem is actually in the parents. You have a book called Love Leadership, John, and you were talking about the solution is not giving our children or our youngsters more money. Unfortunately, we've become so spoiled that we've turned giving money to somebody as a sign of admiration and sign of love. Now the question is, how do we reverse that? Because I've attended your speech last year here in Jeddah, and you were talking that we need to prepare for a day when possibly the economy won't be as good as it is today, and if we continue this way, we won't be ready. So is it too late to kind of reverse that kind of psychological thing about giving money as a way of love and actually bestow the love of creating money instead of just taking it without any value?
Shukran jazeelan. Joanne first, then I will ask Dr. Saeed. Well, I'll give each one of you 1 minute.
I'll try to answer actually the first and the last a little bit too. So in terms of inspiring people to become entrepreneurs, have entrepreneurs come speak at your school. I would also create a class in entrepreneurship. I would try to create internships where students can then work in early stage companies and get the kind of the hands-on feel of what it's like to be in a startup. And to the point of how you inspire the next generation, one thing that we do with Endeavor is we make sure our entrepreneurs give back. In order to get all of the resources of Endeavor that Endeavor has, you have to give a piece of your equity back to the local office in order to help the next generation. And what we find is our entrepreneurs who have success then become the leaders, the funders, the mentors of the next generation.
Thank you, Reed. Dr. Saeed?
Sure. Regarding the question that came from the gentleman on the role of the banks, and I would talk about NCB in particular. In 2004, we established a unit in the bank called Corporate Social Responsibility Unit, or department actually. And what we've done over the years is we partner with chambers of commerce across the kingdom in training young Saudis, males and females, on how to start their businesses. And there are hundreds of them, and some of them made successful businesses. So we already started with that. We also work with what we call it al-usar al-muntija, or productive families. We provided small financing to some of the families that are in need. And we bought whatever products they produce because we designed what they should be producing, and we bought it from them in order to assist them in being able to market their products. So we're doing some of our shares in contributing to the community.
Claude, please.
I would like just to mention one thing. If you want people to be entrepreneurs, put them in contact with some people who have succeeded in their enterprise. And you will create immediately a reaction among many people who will be very simple. Why not me? we have seen the power of example, the power of emulation. I think it is a matter of putting people in contact with success. Success is very contagious.
Bravo. Boutros?
I'd like to say a couple of words regarding the entrepreneurship. I mean, I went to school at MIT, and it's known for its entrepreneurship efforts. One thing that is very tangible, get students to compete, at the school level with some projects, ideas, develop them, and then you get VCs to come and listen and see what kind of ideas, plans exist. And the VCs in general support a lot of the projects and eventually will take it through. And once you see the success breeds success. And
thank you, Boutros.
Thank you.
Quick.
A perfect example, the U.S. Saudi Arabian Business Council over the last 3 years has had the privilege of organizing tours within the U.S. for the Prince Salman Young Entrepreneurs Award. And as a result of that, there have been not only networking and exposure to other entrepreneurship systems, but also actual deals. So the Khan Academy signed with Prince Salman Young Youth Center, a contract which came out of those visits. So I would encourage exchanges with other countries, other entrepreneurships within other countries.
John, final cheerful comment, please. Cheer the youth up. Let them have a bright future, please.
Yeah,
with your thoughts.
I said rainbows follow storms. You cannot have a rainbow storm first. Nobody changes in good times. Why would you? You only change in bad times. The demographics of your region will force you to deal with things differently. And when Saudi Arabia started giving these monies to underprivileged people and others, you had a few million people. Now you have almost 28 million. You literally can't afford it for very long. And there's a Citigroup report that was out last year that showed that in 35 years, you have the risk of being a net oil importer. Those three facts, those trends will force you to reimagine how you treat each other, how you love each other, how you share, appreciate each other. And basically, writing a check to somebody is a lazy man's version of real love. You have a chance to get it right. And I think that Saudi Arabia in particular has a chance for the entire region to be a bit of a beacon of hope for this generation that is just thriving and striving and desiring to be just like you. And the road about mentoring and role modeling is absolutely the key. I would challenge, as a closing comment, 5% of businesses in the MENA region to create an unpaid business internship. 5% of businesses that create an unpaid business internship, you'll turn the entire situation around. Because all a kid wants is a good job or a shot at economic opportunity. And that will connect education with aspiration.
Thank you, John. That's a very good closing. شكرا اخوان. في عندنا 5 اسئله نبغى تفاعلكم معها. 5 اسئله حتكون على الشاشه. في تصويت. التصويت حيكون معاكم. كل تصويت حيكون 30 ثانيه او 15 ثانيه. What is well, we need this voting. Well, we need the voting. It's not on yet. Okay, shall we? First one, please. Saudi Arabia is an attractive for business investment. Please say yes or no. One voter only? Come on.
Yeah.
2, 3 voters? Come on. I need to see more. There you go. All right, give us the result, please. Okay, 65% agrees and 35% disagree. Okay, the second question is, the financial services sector provides sufficient support for SMEs, business, size businesses. Do you agree or you disagree? We need your vote. Ladies, we need your vote. SMEs, support, finance. Do you get enough finance? Only 2 voters, 6 voters, 14, 32, 40, 50 voters. All right, we're going good. 62 voters. Okay, close it. Let's have the result, please. Wow, 90%, 29% disagree, or agree, sorry. 71% disagree. So financial services are not supported. Third one, youth will, with youth representing the majority of the population, is this true? So, yeah, finally, I see it here. I need your vote. With youth representing the majority of the population, 16. I need more. I need 70. Last record was 64. 3 more. 70. We need 3 more votes. All right, close it at this level. What is the result? Yes, positive. 86% says yes, and 14% negative. All right, the fourth question. Is the future of Saudi Arabia dependent on, on big business growth or small and medium business growth? Please only press button 1 or 2. Please only press the button once the light turns green when your vote is received. So I need votes here, please. We need to reach that 70. 27 so far, 33, 36, 44. Still need more votes. Gone. All right, I need the result. 29% big business growth, 71% says small and medium business growth. And this is very encouraging because it shows that SMEs are a major part of our business society. The final questions. Saudis are exposed to business opportunities. Do you agree on this? Do you have the opportunity to get business through any other media other than just getting into by luck? I need votes here, especially from youngsters and ladies, of course. Only 4 votes so far. What a shame on this question. Do you get business opportunities? I mean, do you get the exposure through business? Do you get business from ideas, from studies, from media? $55, okay, close it. 29% agree and disagree 71%. With that, thank you very much. I think we're closed here. And please give me a big applause for
I'll give applause to the participants. Thank you for your patience and your collaboration. Thank you, Engineer Bahlaiwa, for moderating this session. Thank you for the participants who are speaking about enabling links between investors and business. Please remain seated. And I hope that the Vice Chairman of the Council of the Jeddah Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Bazin Batarji, to come and honor the participants. Pending the end of the honoring, I'd like to speak about the OCAN device which you can receive from the main entrance of this room, and you can participate in voting and making active participation in all sessions of today's or this session of this year's session of JEF. You can take this device so that it can introduce you or acquaint you with the issues, and you can, by using it, participate actively in this year's forum. As I mentioned earlier, you can obtain this device from the main entrance and you can keep it with you. This device is completely different from the other devices you can use to vote. These devices must be returned so that we can use them in each session. Now we'll stop for a short pause and or break. We'll be back at 5 p.m. exactly in a session in which we will have many surprises and statistics relating to employment of youth in the Arab Gulf, which will be moderated by Gallagher, who is a leader of consultancies.